if we'll see if any of the other individuals join us as we move through the content today. Thanks again for joining. Good morning. You are in the Illinois Works 2024 Grantee Renewal webinar. Today, the focus is an in-depth conversation about the renewal process. Just wanted to make sure that you are in the right place. This webinar is only for grantees that are either in their first year of funding this year or were in the first year of funding last year. This is not for grantees that this is their third year of funding. In order to renew funding for those grantees, they were supposed to have applied through the NOFA process, which we released in July and closed last Friday. So just want to make sure that you are in the right place. Welcome to the webinar. As I said earlier, thank you for taking time today. It's very important that we go over all of these details. So in the next hour and a half, we have an opportunity to learn about the renewal process. If you have been part of this webinar before, because this is your second year of funding, this may be a review, but stay tuned because there are some changes to the renewal process, particularly a few changes related to the documents that need to be submitted. So we want to make sure that you are able to successfully complete the documents if you are offered renewal. The target audience for this program are organizations who have been offered or potentially will be offered the opportunity for renewal, either regular renewal or conditional renewal. And ideally, we're talking today to program administrators, grant writers, fund developers, program managers, program coordinators, people that are intricately aware about the details of your program and how that relates to our standards at Illinois Works. Keep in mind, this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available at the partner guide in the next few days so that if someone in your team or a colleague needs to listen to the content of the webinar, they can visit the partner guide and it'll be made available in the next couple of days. Today with me, as you know, we have a team of dedicated professionals at the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program, and today with me to help deliver this webinar is Monica Pruitt, who's a grant manager. Monica, please say hi to the audience today.
Thank you, Normie. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Monica. And also Dan Martinez, who's also one of our grant managers. If you could please say hi, Dan.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
Okay, great. In terms of our course description, grant renewal is the opportunity to receive a contract modification that extends eligible grant agreements and funding through the end of 2025. So if you are offered to renew, it will be going from January 1st, 2025, all the way to the end of December 31st, 2025. The Office of Illinois Works will share the details of the renewal process, including criteria for renewal, as well as documents required for application and overall renewal timeline. So that's the focus of our course today. Very, very important that we ask any questions. So if you have any questions, you could either put your question in the chat, or you can actually unmute yourself at a particular moments in time when we give you an opportunity to ask questions so that we can answer as many questions as we can. We want this to be a very interactive experience today. So let's start with some introductions. We want to know who's here today. If you could please in the chat enter your name, the organization you represent, and then also the year when you first received funding for Illinois Works. Again, your name, the organization or agency you represent, and the original grant year you received funding. In this case, it'll be either 2023 or 2024. So if you could please go ahead and do that in the chat, I would appreciate it. And if I didn't mention before, and we haven't met, I'm Norman Wano, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Illinois Works. Just assume everybody knew me, but that may not necessarily be a good assumption. Okay, great. So we we're starting to see people entering their information. We have Doug from Denville Area Community College. Welcome to this event, Doug. Tawana from Project Foot. Thanks for joining us. 2023 funding. Denville Area Community College. I don't know year there. William with Richland Community College 2023 funding. Welcome. Gail with Women's Innovation Group 2024. Welcome, Gail. Jane with Rincon Family Services 2023. Jake also with Rincon Family Services 2023. Ashanda with YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago 2024. Welcome, Tiffany, Metropolitan Family Services. Brina with Illinois Foundation of Skills 2024. Anybody else? Please enter your information so we know who's here with us today. We have a total of 20 participants as we speak.
Norma, let me add, there are a few people who added before you started, which is Jess Woods from YMCA of Metro Chicago, Joe Chapa from Lewis University, Sarah Cleveland from Rock Island County, Jackie Lawson from Illinois Foundation of Skills USA, Xavier Garcia from Quad County, and Latricia Alexander from Chicagoland Prison Outreach. So sorry to interrupt, but I didn't want them to go unmentioned.
Thank you. I tried to go all the way up. I don't know. It didn't come up on my screen, so I apologize about that. Then we have Carrie Selk from ABC Illinois. 2023 is the first year they received. Thank you all for providing your information, and again, welcome to this webinar. We want to make it as informative and interactional as possible. So please, again, don't hesitate to ask any questions you may have as we proceed. Any questions so far about what we're going to be covering today? See any questions in the chat, Monica?
There are no questions, Norman.
Okay, great. So moving on to section 2, pathways for contract modification. This one is going to be very important so that you know the pathways that we use to be able to give a renewal, a contract modification to renew funding. So by the end of this section, you'll be able to identify the 2 pathways for a contract modification and describe the Illinois Works criteria for renewal. Something that is very important, if you are offered renewal and you apply for renewal, what that basically means is that you're going to go through a process to modify your existing contract, your existing agreement for an extra year, and money will be added to that agreement, okay? Plus, obviously, time. So it'll go from ending at the end of 2024 to ending at the end of 2025. So let's get going here, Dan. So if an existing grantee has met at least 60% of or more of the outline and approved outcome metrics at the time of renewal review, which will take place during the September compliance review, they will be invited to renew their Illinois Works grant agreement for an additional 1-year period. Okay, so what that means is that's the reason why in the last compliance report, you notice we put notes indicating, make sure you address these flags by the time we pull the next monthly compliance, because we're going to be making renewal determinations on the basis of that. So this month's compliance reports will be going out to grantees between the 18th and 19th of September. And it is the ratings and those monthly compliance reports that we will use, the compliance rating and those reports that we will use to determine who gets renewed. There are 2 pathways on how you can get renewed. One is just a regular renewal. Organizations that meet or exceed outcome metrics at 76% or above, as you know, that means that you are in good standing with Illinois Works, which is good progress or good standing. Or if you are in excellent progress above 100%, you will be offered a regular renewal with few conditions, okay? So that's the first path, is you have regular renewal with few conditions, and the conditions at this point are typically conditions related to changes that we may be making related to the system. The second opportunity you have is, or the second pathway is conditional renewal. Organizations that have met outcome metrics at a rate of between 60 and 75%, resulting in inadequate progress high. You have to be at least inadequate progress high. Overall rating may be offered grant renewal with multiple conditions. Okay, so that's important. You may get a renewal offer, however, it's going to have conditions in order for you to address compliance so that you can get to good standing. So again, 60% or above, up to 75, you can be offered conditional renewal. Anything below 60%, which is inadequate low, will not receive a conditional renewal. Any questions about this? So you're either at 75, above 75%, which will give you a regular renewal, or if you're 75, 60 to 75, you can receive conditional renewal. Now, it's important to keep in mind that we are the ones that offer renewal. We do not, you cannot request renewal. We have to offer it to you. There's also an important point to keep in mind here is that we will also pull data. If you didn't make the renewal cut in September, make sure that when we release that report, that compliance report in September, you address all the flags that are being identified in your verification sheet, in your compliance report, because you will have a second opportunity in October. So in October, we're going to pull data again. At the end of this webinar, we're going to give you the timeline exactly of when that will happen, but we will pull data again in October, and you'll have a second opportunity for renewal in October if you do not make the cut in September. If you do not make the cut in October, you will not be offered renewal for the Illinois Works system for funding next year. One thing to keep in mind, and I'll mention this because I've been asked several times about it, if you are not offered renewal, can you in the future apply through a NOFO process to get funding? You can. If you're not offered renewal in October, you can. We're going to release another NOFO in July of 2025, and through that process, you can apply for funding again. And we've had some grantees in the past do that. However, keep in mind that when you do that, because you were already part of Illinois Works, your performance with Illinois Works will be taken into consideration when you apply through a NOFO funding process, and you will have to demonstrate at that point how your program is different, how your program has addressed the challenges that you had that resulted in non-compliance, and that was the reason why you didn't get offered renewal, okay?
Norman,
Okay,
before you move on, William
yes,
just wants to clarify. So anything below 60% will not be offered a renewal.
that is correct. Anybody, any organization that has a rating of 60% or below, I'm sorry, below 60%, 60% to 75% will be offered conditional renewal. Anything below 60%, either in the September monthly compliance report or the October monthly compliance report, will not be offered renewal for Illinois Works. Any other questions, Monica, before I move on?
No more questions.
Okay, great. So what's the process for renewal? The Office of Illinois Works Grant Managers, as you know, conduct a regularly scheduled monthly compliance review process and determine each grantee's overall rating in keeping with the monthly compliance review process. Monthly compliance data will be pooled, reviewed, and verified by the grant managers. Based on the results of the September compliance review, the deputy director and the grant managers will determine which grantees will receive an invitation to renew their grant for the following grant year. Organizations offer an opportunity to renew will receive a renewal invitation after receiving their standard monthly compliance reports. This invitation will include the instructions on the documents that must be submitted, the timeline to be followed, and also a link. You will receive a link, a smart sheet link that will be used for submitting your renewal documents. It's very, very important that once we make you an offer and you submit those documents, that you respond to OGM's grant manager as soon as possible to ensure timely approval of your grant modification. Because as I mentioned earlier, the renewal process actually requires a grant modification, grant agreement modification, which obviously requires a budget modification. So it's important that you respond to OGM questions within 24 hours. Otherwise, this may delay the process. I can tell you in the past, a couple of times when we have sent out modifications, we had to chase grantees around for months for them to respond to OGM related to their budget modifications, and that is just not very helpful. OGM will let us know of any grantees that are not responding to them so that we can get involved, and then we will proactively reach out to grantees. But it's very important, again, that this process is done effectively. Otherwise, this results in significant delays, and then later on we hear all the challenges related to those delays. Um, it's very important to keep in mind that we reserve the right to place conditions for renewal on grantees. Again, particularly if you're being offered conditional renewal, we may put some conditions for renewal, particularly if you are operating in inadequate or poor progress. Obviously, the reason why we're saying poor progress is because we may offer you renewal when you are in a compliance rating of 60 to 75%. But while we're doing the renewal, if you fall below that, let's say you get to poor progress, or you're having issues with your program, we may either place significant conditions on your agreement, or we may pull that offer to renew given how low your compliance has fallen. So it's important that you keep that compliance and that you even increase the compliance. Ideally, all of our grantees, by the time the program year ends, are in good progress when it comes to compliance. Any other questions, Monica, in the chat?
So Norman, just once again to confirm, Joe asked, so any organization that has above 76% compliance will automatically be offered. He asked conditional renewal, but I believe that should be regular renewal.
Yeah, anybody that is 76% or above in the September or October data pool will be offered regular renewal with few conditions. Regular renewal is renewal with few conditions, okay? Conditional renewal is for organizations that are 60 to 75% in their compliance rating, and those organizations will be offered renewal with conditions. So it's called conditional renewal, right? So that we get them to move up in their compliance.
Okay. Thank you, Norman.
Any other questions before we move on to the next section?
No additional questions.
Okay, so handing it over now to Monica, who will talk about the renewal process, and then Monica will pass it on to Dan, who will discuss the documents that we're going to be talking. Then I'll come back at the end to discuss the timeline. So thanks again. I'll be in the background in case there are questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Norman. Good morning again, everyone. In section 3, we're going to talk more about the renewal process. By the end of this section, you will be able to list the steps in the renewal process and also to describe the actions for each step in the renewal process. So, steps for the renewal process. The renewal process includes the following steps: renewal document submission, evaluation, negotiations. We'll reach consensus and agreement modification. We should also mention here, comply with closeout. As a reminder, grantees are still accountable for closeout activities regardless of their renewal status. This includes providing any information requested for the annual reports produced by the Office of Illinois Works. Okay, so step one is renewal document submission. Once a grantee has received an invitation to renew, they will be required to submit a set of renewal documents. We will review each of the renewal documents in detail during the next section of this training. Second, there's evaluation. The Office of Illinois Works will review the renewal documents that are submitted and recommend a grant amount, the expectations for performance outcomes, and also the conditions for a 2025 contract modification. During this evaluation step, Illinois Works may have questions or may need additional information. If additional information is needed from grantees, the Illinois Works grant manager will make a request to the grantee. Grantees will then have 2 business days to respond to the Illinois Works request for information. The third step is negotiations. Grantees will have an opportunity to review the Illinois Works recommended terms and conditions and provide feedback during negotiations. Grantees will also be able to answer any other questions the Office of Illinois Works may have. Negotiations will only take place with grantees who were offered conditional renewal or who are planning or need significant changes in their outcome metrics or programming. So the way that works is that instead of individual negotiations, there will be a group presentation. Only if there are considerable changes, concerns, or conditional renewal will a 20-minute negotiation meeting be scheduled with the Illinois Works grant managers, and then a final meeting with the deputy director should that become necessary. Even though there is a negotiation process, Illinois Works reserves the right to accept, modify, or reject grantee feedback or alternate recommendations. So in step number 4, we're looking to reach consensus. The goal of the negotiations is for the Office of Illinois Works and for grantees to reach an agreement regarding the terms and conditions of the modified contract. And again, Illinois Works reserves the right to accept, modify, or reject terms and conditions recommended by grantees. Step number 5, agreement modification. Illinois Works may meet with the DCO director and her leadership team to present the renewal proposals and the justification for extending funding. Illinois Works will address any questions or information requests from the DCO director. Once approval has been received, updated scopes will go to the Office of Grants Management to initiate the grant modification process. That process includes a budget modification, which you will learn more about a little later in this session. Grantees will be notified once the modifications have been implemented. Illinois Works and the Office of Grants Management may require changes to be made to submitted budgets. As I mentioned earlier, a final step is to comply with closeout. The goal of the Illinois Works closeout is to verify the completeness and quality of the data entered into IWRS. Since 2023, Illinois Works has utilized a rolling closeout process, which culminates at the end of each grant year. Each month, the grant managers verify program metrics. During the closeout process, we conduct a final review to ensure all enrollment, completion, and transaction information is provided for each program participant. This will end in January of the following grant year. So for our current grantees, your closeout will end in January 2025. Once completion for each participant has been verified, grantees will receive closeout funds, which is 10% of your overall grant funding. If you happen to be a grantee who received an advance, this closeout amount will be reduced accordingly. Also, as required by the Illinois Works Jobs Program Act, in April of each year, Illinois Works must publish an annual report to the Illinois Works Legislative Panel. That report outlines each of the following grantee efforts: recruitment, screening, training, and participant demographics. Other detailed metrics regarding applications, Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship enrollments, completions, and DOL registered apprenticeship program enrollments are also reported. As grantees, you are required to comply with this final step. Are there any questions before we proceed with the next section? If so, certainly please feel free to use the chat or you may unmute your line.
There are no questions currently in the chat. Oh, here we have one. We have here from LaShonda, when can grantees expect to receive an invitation for renewal after the September or October compliance report is sent out?
Well, LaShonda, I'm going to say stay tuned. Actually, there's going to be a timeline presented closer to the end of the section, so Dan will get into that in the next section. So if there are no additional questions, I will hand the mic to Dan, who will talk about those renewal documents.
Fantastic. Thank you, Monica. And that's a great question, LaShonda. We definitely will be covering that in the next section, in section 5. For my discussion, we're going to be talking about renewal documents and making sure that you understand the what it takes to successfully complete and submit each of the documents, and then making sure that we understand that all of the disclosure documents are required as well. So our renewal documents, there are 7 of them for the renewal process. We have a GATA checklist. We have a Smartsheet application and application signature page. We have our work plan, our program improvement plan, including a data quality management program, marketing plan, a staffing plan, the curriculum plan, utilization of the budget modification template, and then the disclosure documents. So during the previous section, we talked about renewal document submission. These are the documents that are referenced. We're going to go through each one of these now, kind of step by step. First, we have the GATA checklist. The GATA checklist is a tool designed to assist grantees with complying with the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act. So this is more on a statewide level rather than just the Illinois pre-apprenticeship program. Each grantee organization must be in good standing with the state to receive state grant funds. Organizations not in good standing will be required to address these issues prior to the execution of a grant modification as part of the Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship program renewal process. I want to highlight here that you must be in good standing with all of your state grants. So it could be that that there's a different grant that your program is operating, and non-compliance with that grant would prevent you from being in good standing with the state overall. Organization leaders are required to certify each of the statements on the GATA checklist to verify that they're in good standing and eligible for a budget modification. And you'll be asked to initial each one of those to the right of each statement. The next document section that we're going to talk about is the Smartsheet application. So since last year, 2023, the pre-apprenticeship program has utilized an online application through Smartsheet technology. This application is also where all the other required documents will be submitted. And in addition to the application and the required documents, renewal grantees will be asked to submit an application signature page that contains their original signature. Although you submit all the documents on Smartsheet, we're asking that there's a separate application page that you will then also submit showing showing your signature for that. The smart sheet is the smart sheet submission is the only way to submit documents for your renewal process. Paper applications will not be accepted. So we're not asking you to email these documents to us. Everything must be filled out and submitted through the smart sheet application. I know there's a lot to to these documents. So if you have a question while I go through any of these documents, please feel free to put that in the chat so that I don't go through every section and then your question was already one of the first ones. So just throwing that out there as a little reminder.
Well, in that case, Dan, let me interrupt you for a moment. Earlier, before at the beginning, Gail asked what page is this on in our granting manual, and I'm sorry, I missed what Gail is looking for. So Gail, would you mind unmuting and letting us know exactly what you're looking for so that I can help you find that page number or that information? Go ahead, Dan. I'll send Gail a message separately. Sorry to interrupt.
Sure, no problem. And possibly she's just referring to the overall renewal process, but I think again that's what this webinar is for versus the grantee manual. So at any rate, Gail, if you want to add more into the chat, we'll be happy to address it. So for the application itself requires you to communicate, of course, your information as an organization, your organization's name, address, etc. Your total 2024 grant award. So that's your current award. So for those of you that this is your first year, obviously that's pretty simple. For those of you that operated in 2023 and 2024, we're looking for your total combined for that because that's your current grant award amount. Of course, then entering the 2025 requested grant award. So in addition to your current amount and the number of cohorts that you're proposing, we're also going to ask for the 2025 metric goals. So starting with the number of individuals that you hope to enroll in 2025, and then the completion and primary transition goals that are based off of those. So again, as always, the completion goal is 85% of your enrollment goal, and your primary transition goal is 70% of your enrollment goal. So once you set an enrollment goal, your completion and primary transition goals are fixed, in other words. So if any changes are being made to your outcome metrics, cohort numbers, or grant award with this application, we'll also request an explanation for that change. So in other words, what we're saying there is if in 2024 you served 40 enrollments, right? That was your enrollment goal. And for 2025, you would like to have an enrollment goal of 80. We'd like an explanation of how that's going to be managed and what will take place in order to accommodate that change. But also, if you had served 40 in 2025 and now you're requesting to serve 20 in if you served 40 this past year and now you have an enrollment goal of 20, we'd ask for an explanation of that change as well. So any questions about the renewal application and that general information?
There are no questions in the chat.
All right, great. So next, we'll talk about the work plan. Hopefully everyone is familiar with this. It gives you the opportunity to communicate, again, those same outcome metrics that you're putting on your application and the instructional information. So, and as we should all be very familiar with, the work plan includes a table A where you would include those outcome metrics, and then table B, which is the instruction information. There you're able to communicate your intentions regarding recruitment. So, the kind of the broad marketing plan of how many individuals you believe you can reach out to, and hope to have them reach back out and provide their contact information. So essentially those inquiries. Enrollment participants, or enrolled participants. So obviously that needs to match the overall goal. So each of the cohorts need to add up to the overall goal. Those are the individuals who, of course, will complete that pre-screening, complete the Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship application, go through the Illinois Works standardized interview successfully, and then be offered a spot in your program, and then attend training. So those, of course, are the enrolled participants. Completion participants or completed participants, those are individuals who start instruction and successfully complete all of the required training certifications. They meet the attendance requirements, the post-attendance requirements, post-assessment requirements, and obtain those industry recognized certifications and credentials. It also asks for each cohort that you identify the number of primary transitions, primary transition participants. So those are graduates of the pre-apprenticeship program who have applied to and or have been accepted into a DOL registered apprenticeship program. So of course we need documentation showing that the person has applied, completed their application, they've been placed on a wait list, or they've been enrolled and accepted into that DOL registered apprenticeship program. Then we have the opportunity to, then all the rest of the completed participants should be secondary transitioned participants, right? So everyone that graduates should either be a primary or a secondary. And primary are the ones that you are, that we set the funding and the compliance ratings based on. And so that's on table A there, where we want to know, how 70% of all enrolled individuals need to have that primary outcome, but all the rest of your graduates should be a secondary outcome. So those are graduates of the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program who choose not to apply to a DOL registered apprenticeship program, and instead, participate in one of the active outcomes, such as, registering for a college program or other advanced training program, or go to work in a construction or non-construction field. So we want those tabulated for each cohort as well. Of course, as with all the documents, this must be included with your renewal submission. And this is where the dates for your recruitment and instruction and transition will be outlined for each cohort for 2025. So I know there was a lot of information about the work plan. Hopefully you're all very familiar with it, because it's a live document, a living document. We base every single compliance on your current approved work plan. So do we have any questions about it?
So then the question we do have from Tiffany is, how are these documents that you're describing assessed?
So
There's the word.
There we go. Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably should have mentioned this right at the beginning. I was going to hit it on the recap, but we will send an email to everyone that is participating in this webinar, all of these documents. We had talked about it internally. We want you to have all of the current documents, the 2025 documents. Some have changed just slightly from your 2024 ones. Sometimes that just means that we included a space for your organization. You can see on the screen for the work plan, there isn't an actual organization name, I think, on this one. So they've been updated a little bit. So you'll receive those. So that's a great point. Do not use your current documents, your current 2024 work plan. Wait till you receive this email, and you'll have all of the 2025 documents that would be required for a renewal submission. And you know, I want to highlight that we're going to make these available to everyone that's attending the program. Receipt of those does not mean that you have been extended a renewal offer. It's just that once we do extend those renewal offers, as you'll see in the timeline, there's typically about 5 business days of a turnaround. So once we send out the invitation to renew, we're going to ask that you have all these completed and submitted to Smartsheet within, I think it's 5 business days. Again, we'll see that timeline in a moment. So it would be very beneficial for your organizations, the organizations that intend on renewing, to begin working on these and have them ready as soon as possible. All right. So the next area is the program improvement plan. So of course, you know, as part of our, you know, continuous improvement, continuous program improvement, we do require that all organizations put together a program improvement plan. Most organizations are doing this naturally, I've found, a lot of times in just, you know, casual conversations. An organization will say, oh, you know, we found that this really worked better for us than that, or yeah, for this next cohort, we're going to be doing this. All that can be placed into a program improvement plan. And of course, you know, it is required of all grantees throughout the year to do that. And certainly as part of the renewal, we're requiring that. We want to take a good program and make it great, right? So all programs should be doing this. It's not to be confused with a corrective action plan. This is a very positive continuous improvement type of a plan. Within a program improvement plan, we also want to ensure that grantees are providing us with their data quality management plan or policy. A comprehensive data quality management plan should include, but not be limited to, things like identifying your data entry coordinators or coordinator, including a daily or weekly you know, time clock for data entry. So specifying the particular days of the week and the times that data entry will be entered. So that could be something like, you know, as part of our, you know, data quality management and overall program improvement, we are going to set aside every Thursday from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock for the data entry coordinator to update IWRS, right? And from a program administrator, program manager, executive level, that time should be protected and uninterrupted. And that way we ensure that the programs are getting credit for the things they're doing on the ground by updating that information into IWRS. And then of course, having a data validation process. So that is crucial. We talk about it all the time. Having a second individual who can be accountable for that data review. Typically, you know, on the last day of a month, you know, this person, or the last day of the week, this person can go into IWRS and utilize one of our program checklists. We have a participant data checklist, and, you know, and complete these verification processes to check on what the data entry coordinator has entered into IWRS. And not only that, to ensure that the documents are not only there, but that they're accurate, right? I was just talking to another grantee and discussing how occasionally I'll look and I'll see a diploma has been uploaded. So I'll click on it and it's a middle school diploma. Well, the data entry coordinator did their job. They uploaded the diploma that was, you know, provided to them, but somebody needs to ensure that the document is what it's supposed to be, or that every signature is signature line is signed, and every, you know, date line is a date has been entered. So, you know, if there are any inaccurate or incomplete information, you know, work with that data entry coordinator or the individuals responsible for gathering and collecting that data to ensure that it's update and correct in IWRS. And something like that should be done, you know, at least every month. right, prior to the monthly compliance pull, confirming that any of the flags identified by your grant manager in the compliance verification worksheet, or any red flags that are identified in IWRS have been cured. Any questions about the program improvement plan?
There are no questions in the chat.
Okay. Just very quickly to highlight a couple of things on here. There are 3 primary tables. Your outcome metrics, again, we're looking for information on what your current goals were and what your actual performance was for the current year, and then what your target populations were for this past year, and your then identifying the opportunities for improvement. So our next step is the marketing plan. The marketing plan is a critical tool for successful outreach. Your marketing plan should include your target audience for 2025, a list of communication channels that you will be utilizing, a timeline for when the marketing and communications will be distributed, as well as specific, staff assignments. So when filling out the marketing plan, you'll want to, think about, who is your audience? Think about the type of outreach that you're going to utilize, the types of material that will attract your target population. Depending on the target population, your program may need to target specific communication mediums, right? So, you might, one organization might have a specific population that they know utilizes, TikTok over other forms of communication. A different grantee might say, well, for our area, really paper flyers and, knocking on doors with other community organizations are where we're going to find our target population. So, make sure that that is relevant to your program and your area. We want to, thoughtfully consider how often you should send out those outreach messages, and, and when you should do that in order to properly recruit your cohorts. And how much there's the final page on this includes information on your budget. Oops, I went past that. So not all outreach requires funding, but some avenues do, and that might include paid advertisements, even the cost of printing flyers, registration fees for outreach events, maybe a career fair that you're attending. And if your team is going to utilize outreach that requires the funding, make sure that an appropriate budget has been allocated and is itemized on this marketing plan. And further, there needs to be a direct correlation between this marketing plan budget and the information that is included on that budget template that we're going to discuss in a little bit, right? So if your marketing plan indicates a $4,000 marketing budget, then when we look at the actual budget, we need to be able to identify that $4,000, and it shouldn't be $2,000, right? So we need to make sure that those are in alignment. Also, identifying specifically who is responsible for each of the activities, creating, approving the marketing, sending out those outreach messages, especially if you're utilizing social media. Maybe your program has a single marketing person, or maybe you have this task split up. It's important to identify the members of those programs, and especially looking at the approved materials before they are sent to the public, maybe at a higher level, the program manager or program administrator. And then finally, tracking your progress. So as you increase your outreach efforts, make sure to track which tools, which locations, which messages are successful. That could include, monitoring social media reactions. So how many emails were opened, how many people came back to you off of that, TikTok promotion that you had, the number of participants that cite, oh, I heard about you from this specific location. In the pre-screening tool, all potential participants are asked how they, heard about the program. So you want to definitely record that in IWRS, and that type of thing can also then feed that program improvement plan that we had discussed just a moment ago. So any questions about the marketing plan?
No questions in the chat.
All right. So we'll take a look now at the staffing plan overview. Of course, in order to successfully implement the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program, or really any program, right? Successful applicants will need to outline how the key program areas will be staffed and ensure that the quality of the program and services delivered is very high. So a staffing plan will include, the roles of the pre-apprenticeship program. So your program administration, your outreach and recruitment, intake, wraparound services, student support services. Of course, those are the academic needs. Instruction, so your trainers, whether it's direct employees or through a vendor. Transition, right? Transition service coordinators and that follow-up that's required with all of your participants. And then the data entry that we had talked about a moment ago. And so this information needs to be included as part of the renewal documents. And in addition, we must have staff resumes and instructor credentials, any partnership agreements. So if you're using a vendor for your instruction, and MOUs, memorandum of understandings. So we want to highlight here the importance of the transition service coordinator. That role is integral to what we're trying to accomplish with the pre-apprenticeship program. So all programs serving, larger programs, so that would be about 50 enrollees as a goal, must have the equivalent of a full-time staff member dedicated to the responsibilities of the transition service coordinator role. Programs serving fewer than 50 enrollees must have a staff member fulfilling those responsibilities at least part-time. So that will be guidance that's included in our 2025 grantee manual. So we want to make sure that the staffing plans are filled out in advance accordingly. It's also important to recognize that all staff working on the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program grant must be included not only in that staffing plan, but similar to how we talked about this for the marketing budget, they must be included in the budget template as well. There's a personnel tab, and they should be included there. Now, obviously, if they're contractors or consultants, that would go on a different tab, but your direct staff. And if you're having staff work on this program, but not be funded by the program, as with anything, it still can go on the budget template, and you'll just recognize that as non-state funds. So it won't be part of your Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program budget, but we will at least have identified their work there. So any questions about the staffing plan?
Well, then we have a question specifically about MOUs. Tiffany asked, do the MOUs need to be updated if we're using the same partners, or can we include the existing MOUs?
Yeah, if they're still valid MOUs, you can certainly, yes, they don't need to be re-signed.
And by valid, Dan, I'm assuming you mean they should include some dates. So obviously, if they still fall within the same time frame, or
correct. Thank you, Monica. Yeah, that's what I had intended, or I was thinking. But certainly, most MOUs will have, a date or date of expiration, or a timeline for under which it's operating. And so, as long as that has not expired, then there'd be no need to re-sign the MOU.
Just a moment. Do they have to include Illinois Works specifically? That question comes from Emily.
So can you, Emily, can you share a little bit more? Do you mean, does the MOU have to state work about the Illinois Works Pre-Apprenticeship Program specifically? Is that what you mean, or are you referring to something else?
Yep, yep. That's exactly what I mean, because sometimes we have MOUs with other agencies, just in general. I wasn't sure if you guys needed specifically for Illinois Works.
No, the program itself does not need to be specifically called out. It's more of your interaction with that partner agency and what what the MOU is covering.
Okay,
So
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, no problem. Thank you. All right. So with no other questions, we'll move on to the curriculum plan. The submitted curricula must provide at least 183 hours of instruction and should not exceed 300 hours of instruction unless this has been approved in advance by the Office of Illinois Works. So I do want to highlight that 183 hours of instruction as a minimum is an increase over last year's minimum. And that is in order to properly include required 4 hours of harassment prevention training and 4 hours of diversity and inclusion in construction training into each program's curricula. So those are new required courses for 2025. And so we have increased the minimum number of instruction hours accordingly. As always, instruction should have a strong emphasis on hands-on, either practice in a construction lab or at a job site. It should say and/or at a job site. So your program's curriculum design must be based on the Illinois Works approved curricula, including having an Illinois Works program orientation, which is required, making sure it has an introduction to construction and trades, utilizing one of the nationally recognized pre-apprenticeship program curricula, which includes Trades Futures MC3, the multi-core craft curriculum, NCCER's core certification, or an ICCB certification. That's the Illinois Community College Board certification. So it is, applicants can submit an alternative curricula beyond that Trades Future MC3, NCCR Core, or ICCB. However, keep in mind that curricula must be nationally recognized and based on construction industry best practices for a pre-apprenticeship program. Then, other ones that should be very familiar to you, of course, are, an OSHA 10 certification, the first aid CPR certification, soft skills based on the Illinois Essential Employability Skills Framework. That's required again, 32 to 40 hours. Test taking skills is a required training module. And of course, that work-based learning, a minimum of 10 hours is required for that as well. And then any other relevant certifications that your program wishes to include in your curriculum. So with regard to that work-based learning, that is the focus of our program, and an expectation that that each program provides 10 hours, at least 10 hours of work-based learning for the participants. If your program cannot offer job site experience, your program can utilize an alternate plan, which would include things like job site tours or other methods of providing them with job site learning. However, any alternate plans must be submitted with an explanation of the reason the job site training cannot be offered. And this is a reminder that that type of pre-approval must be requested each year. So hopefully if you were not able to do that and you utilized tours of apprenticeship halls and job sites this year, the expectation would be hopefully that your program has been able to arrange actual on-site job training for the upcoming year if renewed. But again, that type of exception can be pre-approved each year. The curriculum plan we here have a sample curriculum on our curriculum plan to give you the information on the kind of detail that's required. And then after that sample curriculum is the template. So I point that out because often programs utilize the sample as their program. We want you to just see that as a sample and utilize the template on the following page. So this gives you the opportunity to identify the objectives, the number of instructional hours, the delivery format. So, is this going to be a 3-day-a-week program, 4-day-a-week program? Is it mornings? Is it evenings? How many hours a day? That sort of thing. Any prerequisites that are required. Which of those certifications and credentials will you be providing? So obviously you'll have at least 3, the OSHA 10, first aid, CPR, and then one of the ones we discussed, ICCB, NCCER, or Trades Future MC3. But then if there's any other credentials that your organization wishes to provide, they'll be listed there as well. Things like, forklift or an additional safety training, something like that. Then we want, of course, the individual program and module names, the number of hours for each of those programs, and then the total number of hours that the curriculum will provide. So this obviously must be included with your renewal documents. And it's important, again, I'm going to go back to that budget. The number of instructional hours on the curriculum plan must then be reported in the narrative as the basis for any stipends provided. So stipends are placed in the miscellaneous tab of your budget. So again, the stipend payments are going to be based on the number of instructional hours for your curriculum plan. So those need to align as well. Any questions about the curriculum plan?
Dan, Gail has both a hand raised, but she also left a question in the chat. Can we switch to OSHA 30? And Gail, if you needed to elaborate further, please feel free to unmute.
Yes, so when my students have been doing their interviews, they've been asked if they have 30. That's pretty much what the construction world use. They don't really use 10. So
Well, thank you for that question, Gail. We have not found that. We have found OSHA 30 to be more on the supervisory level. So no, we do not accept OSHA 30 as a replacement for OSHA 10. Any other questions about the curriculum?
There's nothing additional in the chat.
Okay. All right, thank you. The next section of the documentation that we wanted to discuss are the budget templates. So the budget template that I've talked about it a couple times, made reference to it. It's an Excel spreadsheet from the state of Illinois. It's a pretty comprehensive document. It contains about 20 tabs. And the very first tab will provide instructions for completion. One of the important things to know is that the first several pages have automatic functions. They will pull numbers from subsequent sheets. So make sure you're paying attention to to the instructions to understand which cells you should be entering information in directly, especially on the sections A and B. and which cells you are not supposed to enter information directly, but rather you enter it in subsequent sheets, and it will pull itself over there. So we are, we work with the Office of Grants Management on developing a format for submitting these budgets so that it's in the format that they require, with the programmatic requirements that we need. So when preparing your budgets, please keep in mind that the expected rate per individual served will be a maximum of $11,000 per participant again this year. And that's, for all the services provided. So essentially you're setting your budget based on the enrollment goal for the year. And then you can utilize up to $11,000 per enrolled individual. And that will be your overall budget for 2024. One change this year, I just talked about stipends a moment ago. This year, the maximum stipend that can be paid per training hour is $14.50. So that's an increase over last year's $14.25. Your budget must be submitted, of course, with all of the other renewal documents. Be sure to include a justification and rationale under each new item. That's what we refer to as the narrative. Make sure you're explaining how you arrived at any line item or requested number. You'll want to confirm that the amount for each line item is properly accounted for in the totals. Again, the spreadsheet has formulas where it automatically totals. In many cases, you'll need to add line items or add lines to the sheet to add line items. And if you do that properly, then it will still total all of the things that you added properly. If not, you may wind up breaking that formula. So you want to make sure you do those properly. Certainly ensure that there's alignment between the budget narrative and the dollar amounts that are entered. So, using stipend as an easy example, if you say you're going to, serve, 100 people at $14 per instructional hour, then the line item should say 1,000. Well, that's $14,000, I think. It shouldn't be less, right? Or it shouldn't be more. It needs to be exactly what that. Oh, this is perfect. It should be exactly what's contained on that budget. So I need to authenticate myself here, otherwise my system is going to shut down. So give me one moment, please.
That only takes a quick second. So in the meantime, are there any questions? I don't see anything in the chat, but this would be a great time to add something in the event that you had a question. It looks like Melanie has a question. Go ahead, Melanie. How about you unmute yourself?
Okay, hi everybody. So a question about the budget total. So you said that would be an $11,000 per participant. Now, does that include the stipend payments as well as we're figuring this in?
So yes, yep. That $11,000 per participant will wind up being the totality of your program. And so if you were serving 50 people, $11,000 is $550,000. That is the entire budget for the entire program. Of course, as all of you should know very well, this is a performance-based grant. So in addition to having that overall budget, performance metrics still need to be met before a reimbursement request can be submitted, but it all gets submitted under that same total.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for bearing with me while I update. I needed to do that right away. This has happened before while I was presenting, and then I get disconnected if I don't do it quickly enough. So good news is we made it in time. So thank you for that pause. Let's see, we were talking about ensuring that the budget narrative and the line items in the on that particular tab are in alignment. And then it's important to know that you will be submitting a budget based on the aggregate of your current year's budget and the 2025 budget. So I think I have an example of what that looks like here. Yeah, so if we have different grantees on this call. Some of you are in your first year of programming with the Office of Illinois Works, so you'd be looking at example 1. So you're in your first year. Maybe your budget is currently $400,000. In 2025, you're submitting a proposal to have a budget of $500,000. So this budget that you're submitting would be for a total of $900,000. Very similarly, if you have if you're currently in your second year, so that means you operated a program in 2023 and now you're operating in 2024 and you're submitting for grant year 3, which would be 2025. It's a total of those that this renewal modification budget template would be based on. So any questions about that?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at how that gets built, just briefly here. So as I mentioned, you're including your previous year's budget and line items. So essentially, you're going to copy over your current budget onto this modification budget, and you're then going to include new line items for 2025. So it's really best to consider this as a modification. I mean, that's what it is. For most organizations, it's simply going to be a modification adding 2025 budget items. But your organization could choose to modify your existing budget at the same time you're adding a proposed 2025 budget. So, maybe you recognize that you had allotted too much in 2024 for wraparound services and not enough for transition services. And you may choose to modify those. So in this case, maybe I need to take $25 from each participant on this line item budget from 2024 from wraparound services and add that to transition services. So what would happen in that case for 2024, and that's 2024 only, for the wraparound services and transition services, I would highlight those lines in yellow and I would change the dollar values. And then in the narrative, I would include 2024 reduced wraparound services from $100 to $75 per participant and increased 2024 transition services from $50 to $75. Again, explaining in the narrative what change you made. In this example, it's only including a change for 2025. So that's all we expect to see in the narrative. We only expect to see in the narrative what you're changing. And so in this case, we're only adding 2025. So that's all we see in the narrative. We don't want to repeat the narrative from the previous year if nothing is changing. So does that make sense to everyone?
Dan, hopefully it makes sense, but in the meantime, Gail would like to know if they can get a copy of this sample.
Absolutely. So I'll make a note of that. We will include, maybe we might do it as a separate email. We'll see. But we'll certainly include, send everyone budget instructions, because that is, especially for those of you that are in your first year, the example one that we had just talked about here, the budget template you used last year was just called a budget template. The one you're going to use this year is the modification budget template, so it is different. So we'll make sure to include those instructions. And of course, again, as with everything, use the documents that we send you, because they all have been updated for 2025, and the budget template is updated by, I think, our Office of Accountability, and that's not even our template, so but they definitely have a 2025 version. Okay. Moving on to the last part of this section, the disclosure documents. So these are certainly mandatory documents that must be filled out completely, signed and dated accordingly. That includes the conflict of interest disclosure and the mandatory disclosure. The conflict of interest disclosure allows you to disclose, details about any personal conflicts of interest concerning any employment, financial concerns, public appearances, etc. This must be submitted with your renewal documents. So certainly if you employ in your organization anyone that is related to you in any way, whether a direct relation or through marriage, make sure those are all included in that conflict of interest disclosure. And then the mandatory disclosure, this requires that all applicants use this form to disclose any and all violations of state and federal criminal law, including fraud, bribery, or gratuity violations that could potentially affect this award. So again, both of these are required to be included with your submission documents. Any questions? I know this was a lot of information. Again, you're going to receive all of this via email and highlighted budget instructions as well. So any questions before I hand this back over to Norman to discuss the timeline?
There are no questions in the chat.
All right, great. Well, Norman, I'll let you take control.
Great. We're doing great timing here. Thank you, Dan and Monica. We're going to move on to the last section of this webinar, timeline and submission. By the end of this section, you'll be able to reference the timeline for submission of your renewal documents and submit renewal documents using the submission form that I had mentioned earlier. So in terms of the timeline, the first round of invitations for renewal will be released right after we release the monthly compliance reports. The monthly compliance reports, as I mentioned earlier, will be released between the 18th and the 19th of September. And those that make the cut at that particular moment in time will receive an invitation by the 20th, end of the day on the 20th. The documents, if you were invited in that first round, will be due back to us on the 27th of September. Very quick turnaround, as Dan had mentioned earlier. We don't have a lot of time here. We're trying to give grantees as much opportunity in terms of performance for them to be able to do what they need to do. But then the timeline for turnaround here is very quick. You will receive, when we send you the invitation, the link that you will need to use. It's a smart sheet form that you have to fill out and update and upload your documents to that form. No documents will be accepted via email or otherwise they will have to be submitted using that link. We will hold our first round grant negotiations 10/7 through 10/11. We'll provide some more details related to the logistics there. And then we'll be presenting to the director, you know,
I'm
actually,
sorry, Norman.
yes,
I'm sorry I have to interrupt for a moment. As everyone can see, I have highlighted in yellow some information I thought I had deleted that was from 2023. So apologies. I thought I had deleted this off of the screen, but I had not. But those were from 2023. So we go
okay, let me
from,
just use the timeline that I have here
yeah,
in
I
front of me.
apologize.
So, second round invitations will go out at 10/18. So once again, we're going to be doing a quick turnaround of the compliance reports in October, and then send out the invitations for 10/18 for second round. If you didn't make the first cut and you make the second cut, it'll be 10/18. The forms will be coming back to us on 10/25. Again, very quick turnaround there for the forms. We will hold second round negotiations 11/4 through 11/8. And then we will hold the renewals presentation to our director for approval on 11/12. So one thing that is important to emphasize here, just because you submit renewal documents doesn't mean that you automatically get approved for a renewal. The only one that can approve renewals is our director, and we will present to her on the 12th. We only present to the director if all the documentation has been submitted, we've evaluated, we've dealt with any red flags that came up through negotiations, and then after that, if everything is fine and grantees are not, if they're sustaining their compliance for this program year, then we'll go ahead and present to the director on the 12th for approval. And then the first week of December, we will send that information off to OGM so that those agreement modifications and budget modifications can take place. So that's the correct timeline here. Any questions related to this timeline?
Norman, there is one question. Corey asked, when will the compliance data pull in October? And based on the timeline I have here, the renewal timeline, it's October the 4th.
Yeah, so October the 4th is when we will be pulling the data, which is the Friday, the first Friday of the month. Typically, we do it the first Friday of the month for data up to September 30th. So it's going to be, again, a quick turnaround. Just make sure that any flags that we raise in your verification worksheets come September, because that's the report, the compliance report you should be working with, that you address those up to the 4th when we're going to be pulling the data. So that's going to be important. Okay. Any other questions?
There are no questions in the chat.
Okay, so as I said, we will release the link, which is a smart sheet link, as part of the invitation to renew. So you will receive that. You will also be receiving the documents soon so that you can start working on those in case you receive an offer for renewal. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to your grant managers related to this matter. As I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded and we're going to make it available in the partner guide so that anybody else or yourself, if you want to review the information we covered, or anybody else in the team that needs to review it or wants to review it, they can certainly do that. So that's all we had for you today. I thank you for joining us today. I don't know if there are any last minute questions before we go. I hope this has been informational and we have been able to answer all your questions.
Thank you,
Any
Norman. There are
final questions?
There are no final questions in the chat.
Okay, well, thank you very much again for joining. We appreciate it. We hope you have a good rest of your day and you enjoy the weekend, okay?
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.